there's kind of three dyads in this play, right? You have
Three dyads. What a
three
phrase.
dyads.
You're breaking out what
Here
do
we
people
go.
say? The $100 vocabulary words? I don't know what people say.
The weird words.
Hello and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I am Jacob. As usual, I am joined by Jackson, and today we are discussing another adaptation. We've been doing a lot of adaptations, it feels like, in the past season and a half. An adaptation of one of the more famous stories in all of Western literature by one of the more famous contemporary living working playwrights in Lauren Gunderson. Today we are discussing Gunderson's adaptation of Peter Pan, which she has titled Peter Pan and Wendy.
Yes, excited for the conversation today. Obviously, well-known story structure, well-known story arc, well-known story characters, and so the way that Lauren Gunderson tweaks those well-knownities and offers new lenses through which to view this story through this adaptation is really fascinating, and excited to be getting the chance to turn to it today in our conversation.
Yeah, there's an American theorist and scholar that I really like named Marvin Carlson, who talks a lot about how theater especially is really good at telling or retelling stories that the audience already knows in some form or fashion. Stories that I think is phrased as stories that are familiar to the audience. And what ends up happening, as it does with most adaptations, is that the focus of the experience becomes not necessarily on the story, because we already know the story, but on how the story is told. What is different? Where are the new ways that Gunderson is inserting herself to update, to change, to reckon with the original source material? And there's some, folks out there who maybe quiver at my use of the phrase "insert herself," but I don't think that necessarily has to have a negative connotation. And all adapters are doing that in some way. This is not JM Barrie's Peter Pan. This is Lauren Gunderson's telling of JM Barrie's Peter Pan. So part of the question becomes, where do you see Lauren Gunderson in the text?
Yeah, which is like a really cool way to do Peter Pan, because even Barrie, who is well known in our era as the writer of Peter Pan, is pulling on the myths of Pan.
Of course.
he's retelling the story of Pan in a new way for his current moment, setting it in London and all that. So it totally makes a ton of sense. Cool that we get to like have this new lens, new vernacular through Lauren Gunderson's writing, and through certainly a more like a feminist model than the original JM Barrie Peter Pan operates in.
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, as the title is going to suggest, this version of the story puts a lot more focus on Wendy, and then also on the character of Tiger Lily. And the play is regularly described as a kind of anti-colonial Peter Pan. Of course, the original Peter Pan story, one of the real problems with it, one of the things that we are reckoning with, to bring that phrase back into the conversation, is the way that Barrie presented the indigenous characters and the sort of colonial forces. These are English people who go to this island of supposedly indigenous folks, and now it becomes the island of the English people. It's Peter Pan's island. So there's obviously, that is a problematic way to view and tell that story. And so Lauren Gunderson has taken efforts to deal with that. There's a really lovely note that she apparently did a fair amount of consulting with indigenous groups about how she was going to present the character, the story, the voice of Tiger Lily. And I'm sure that will be part of our conversation. What's great about this adaptation for conversation is that there's a couple of really clear tracks. I would say that I don't think that this adaptation deals a ton in subtlety, and maybe that is the Peter Pan of it all. I don't know that
Right,
the
that's
Peter
true,
Pan
yeah.
story is a fodder for subtle messaging and themes, and
That's true.
Gunderson leans into that with all the energy and enthusiasm you can imagine. So we have a couple of fairly clear tracks for our discussion on how Gunderson has changed the Pan story. Before we get too far into it, though, a couple of quick announcements for you. The first is that I am recording this episode on the road. This is my spring break from university life, and so I am not in my regular recording studio. All that means is that the sound quality on my end might be somewhat different than you are used to. We hope you will forgive and put up with us. If we have any audiophiles out there who can't stand it, you may have to skip this episode. Unfortunately, I'm not in my padded, sound protected room as I normally am. Apologies for that. And the other announcement, which is great fun, next week begins our themed month for this season. So all through the month of April 2026, you can join us for 4 conversations that have a playwright at their center. We are looking at 4 plays by one playwright. Our wonderful patrons already know the name of that playwright and the titles that we are approaching. Should be great fun. One of my favorite playwrights, one of the playwrights that really inspired me on what theater can be. Reading this playwright's plays when I was a young theater artist opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, that's what we can do? We can do that? And I suspect that that is true for a lot of other theater makers of our generation, that these plays were really in the cultural prominence when we were young theater makers. And so really burgeoned. This playwright has gone on to be one of the great playwriting teachers in all of the West. And a lot of the great playwrights now have done some study with this playwright. So it should be a great fun. That begins next week. 4 episodes, April 2026, themed month. We are looking forward to it.
Yeah. So make your guesses on which playwright we're going to be chatting about.
I mean, anybody who's anybody already knows. Not to,
whoa,
that was enough of a hint, I think.
So yeah, I look forward to that starting up next week. Also, a big thank you to all of our patrons who make things like the themed month possible, who make every season possible here on No Script. Thank you all for being patrons of the show. If you're looking for a way to help out the show or just get involved in No Script in a new way, patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast is the best way to do that. You can become a patron of the show for the low price of just $1, $12 over the course of the whole year. There's a number of different tiers over there as well if you're looking for another way to get involved in the show in different ways, but you get access to patron only posts. You're in the know for which playwright we're talking about when we're doing these teasers as we go into the themed months and things like that. So definitely check it out over there. Thank you to all the patrons who have already done so, and we'll see you over at patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast.
And now, back to the script.
Here we go.
Okay, of course, we've come to Lauren Gunderson many a time in our podcast history, so you can check out one of our other episodes. I forget offhand, I guess I should have looked up which was the first one so that you could get the full playwright context section if you're interested. Maybe we'll put that in the footnotes for you. But this play in particular, one of the things that's cool about Lauren Gunderson's whole library, really, and I don't want to imply that I know that this is true about her intent, although I suspect it is true about her intent, is that her plays are very producible at the college level. And the college theater market, believe me, I can tell you for sure, is desperate for good material for students to work on. I mean, we're just dying for it. And, it's hard because college students, they're a very particular band of age range. Obviously there are non-traditional students in both ends, but the vast majority of college students are like within a 4-year gap. And so you're looking for characters that maybe fall 8 years to either side of that. And that's a pretty limited band of humanity. And you're dealing with all kinds of other pedagogical concerns about the type of material, the quality of the material, and you're trying to sell tickets. It's really hard to program a college season. And I think that Lauren Gunderson, like many other contemporary playwrights, probably has realized that to some degree and writes a lot of her plays such that they're great for college students to work on. They're just great material for college students. And so this play, as with many of her plays, has been produced by high schools, colleges, and professional theaters all over the country. I mean, it's really hit the kind of wide stratosphere in that way, and community theaters. It was commissioned originally by the Shakespeare Theater Company in Washington, D.C., and presented there in 2019. And then we skip the years that we don't like to talk about, and we end up then in Kansas City at the KC Repertory Theater in 2023, where a new kind of reworked version of the script was presented. And that doesn't actually surprise me. The complex things that are happening technically and storytelling and messaging wise in the play, it makes sense to me that there was an updated version after the first trial, and apparently Casey Rep also sort of commissioned the new final version of the script from Lauren Gunderson as well, and so that's presented in 2023. And then here's just sort of a short list so you can see the kind of wide spectrum that this play has been presented in only those 3 short years. Milligan College in 24, Wisconsin Lutheran High School in 2024, Broome Community College in 2025. Northern Stage in Vermont at the end of 25 into early 26. Next Stage Rep in New Jersey presented it in February 26. Broken Leg Theater Company presented it early in March of 2026. And if you are in Pennsylvania and you want to go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, you can see this play at the Hershey Area Playhouse in April of 2026. And now for one of our favorite recurring segments, and I do say our, even though it's probably just my favorite recurring segments.
And I'm here too.
And Jackson's here too. Where I pull up the Concord page because the number of upcoming productions is just so spectacular. In April 2026, Bowling Green State University, Catalina Foothills High School in May of 26, Children's Theater of Annapolis in Maryland in February 27. It's weird that these aren't organized by date for some reason, so I'm skipping around a little bit. Other April 2026 productions: Excelsior Springs High School in Missouri, Hugatone High School in Kansas, the Decatur Central High School in Indiana, also upcoming Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School in Kentucky in May, Philip Simmons High School in South Carolina in April, Reading Bluecoat School in Berkshire, the UK in April. I mean, it's going gangbusters, especially it seems like at the high school and college level. So there's a relatively new play. Speaking, the world premiere was 7 years ago, but then there's that new version that's presented in 2023. So that's kind of a restart, a reset of the script's life. So 2023 to 26. So 3-year-old script. It's having a fair amount of productions out there. I think a lot of people are eager for a Peter Pan story that is faithful enough to the original material that it feels like Peter Pan, so that it meets the audience desire when they advertise Peter Pan, that also grapples with some of the parts of the story that make it hard to tell.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm excited to kind of look around for this play. I'm sure it'll come across my radar eventually. It's a cool play to see what people do with the technical elements as well. So excited to chat about that just a little bit.
Some of the production photos out there are astounding. Yeah. I mean, incredible. The Shakespeare Theater Company production photos in DC, you should Google them just for the design work alone.
Yeah.
It's magnificent.
Beautiful set work, beautiful prop work, all sorts of cool things about it. Just gonna jump into a brief summary of this play. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, because this play certainly uses a well-known story, but with some important
Peter Pan?
changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Peter Pan? Anyone ever heard of Peter Pan? So this play, of course, takes place in London in sort of the time frame that you would imagine it would be in, and it centers on the Darling family, but specifically on Wendy. In the first scene of this play, we have this moment of Wendy's growing up is happening. She's kind of in the communal kids room with her brothers, and her mom and dad come in saying they're about to go to a party, and her mom is like, just so you know, probably tomorrow you're going to move into your own room and it's time to start growing up a little bit. And then you're also going to be heading to finishing school this next year. And Wendy sort of like reacts to a number of those things, resistant to the moving out moment of kind of going into her own space, but also resistant to the finishing school model. She's a scientist. She's an adventurer. She wants to be, someone like Marie Curie, who's just won the Nobel Peace Prize, or the Nobel Prize, not the Peace Prize.
She catches the Nobel the prize to catch it, and Marie Curie catches like a fairly significant subplot of this play.
Yeah,
Who would have
agree.
suspected? Here, let me just illustrate this with two brief examples, because I think this will highlight kind of what Gunderson's doing with Wendy, and you're right there. So the play opens with, I'm just reading from the stage directions, the window's open, the breeze is tossing the curtains by our Wendy, who looks through a small telescope at the night sky. Wendy is in her nightgown and sweater, but is studious in her astronomy. She sees something in the night sky and stops, and she says, "What on earth is that? Or to be more accurate, what in the northwest quadrant of the celestial sphere is that?" She goes on and does a little more science-y stuff like that, right? And then when her mom comes in and says all the stuff that you just described about getting her own room, going to finishing school, growing up, one of the reasons why her mother says she needs to go to finishing school is so that she can be a good wife to a husband and mother to children someday. So you can sort of right away see one of the lenses through which Lauren Gunderson is viewing the story of Wendy in this play, which is from the Peter Pan story, right? She's brought to Neverland to be a mother to the Lost Boys. And I tip my cap to Lauren Gunderson for being, I think, wise enough to ask the most basic questions of the story, which is like, hey, this is a teenage girl. Why is she expected to be a mother to anybody?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and that's like certainly like one of the kind of core themes of this play. Eventually we'll get to like the gotcha moment a little bit, where she arrives in Neverland and that expectation is voiced and she counters it. But anyway, so this scene happens. The parents eventually leave. They take the dog and put him outside, as a typical Mr. Darling is sort of this abrasive, sort of blumbering person.
And in classic Lauren Gunderson style, the dog is like, she's like, I'm not quoting exactly, so I don't want to make it seem like I am, but she says something to the effect of like, she could maybe a real dog, maybe a puppet, maybe an actor as a dog. I don't know. You do whatever you want. Which is, listen, as a director, always love to see that. That's fantastic.
Openness for experimentation. All through this scene, Tinkerbell has been in the room in one way or another. She's been shut in a drawer. She's been jumping in and out of the drawer at one point or another, and Wendy is noticing her. But eventually, after the parents have left, Pan shows up, right? It's the scene in the nursery where Pan shows up with some pretty notable differences, right? Like there's some he again, like he's chasing his shadow. Tinkerbell is trying to help him look for his shadow. Wendy eventually sews his shadow onto him, and he invites them to Neverland, and they begin to take off. Notably, on the journey to Neverland, Wendy is left behind. They're on their way there. They're kind of in the starry sky, and she gets enamored of the stars and like trying to plot out the stars. And she asks them to hold up for a second so she can do it. And he's like, "Can't do it. See you later." And on he goes. And also Tinkerbell notices, and is, as is kind of notable in this plot, but also typical of the Peter Pan story, Tinkerbell starts out with odds with Wendy, and so Tinkerbell is all on board with leaving Wendy behind and leaves her behind. So Wendy is left alone in the stars to try to find her own way to Neverland. We get a brief interlude from the kind of that plot line to meet the Captain Hook with Smee. We kind of get introduced to them and their fight on the island and the way the crew works, which is a delightful blend of cruelty and comedy in this play, and kind of tracking them, and they're continuing to try to find the Lost Boys and also the crocodile on the island, which is important for the next scene, because as soon as we hit Act 2, Scene 2 of Act 2, we are introduced to Tiger Lily, who is friends with Jerome, the crocodile, a large puppet crocodile, which is awesome.
You know, or something, right? It's just called for that Jerome is like an onstage character, or a character that is part of the story, but not necessarily on stage at all times. It's not totally clear how you would do Jerome, which I think in some ways is a benefit, because it allows for a wide a variety of options for a theater company that may not have some of the technical capabilities of like the Shakespeare or the KC Rep original productions, where the crocodile is very fully rendered and very cool.
Right, right. There's certainly again all sorts of invitations for how you could design this play. But regardless, Jerome is a character that Tiger Lily interacts with, and Tiger Lily, notably from a difference, a divergence from the Barrie tale. Tiger Lily is here alone. Her parents are gone, and she's kind of here as on her own, interacting with the Lost Boys and with Peter Pan, but is kind of separated from her family and from her community. And so she and the Lost Boys are introduced in this scene. The pirates are looking for them. They evade capture. Eventually, the crocodile like scares away the pirates and chases them away. And then Peter Pan emerges with the darling boys. John and Michael show up, and they begin to meet all the Lost Boys and Tiger Lily. Right away, Peter Pan and Tiger Lily have this like secret handshake that doesn't involve touching, because Peter doesn't like to be touched during the first part of the play. And their friendship is apparent, even though there is some some tension between them, as Peter is kind of this boorish, kind of his way or the highway sort of a character as he arrives. Eventually, Wendy does find her way there, and she and Tiger Lily hit it off. They have a lot of resonance with each other. However, around this scene, it becomes clear that she was brought here, as Jacob already alluded to be a mother to the Lost Boys. She right away balks at that. She's like, that's not going to happen. And they're like, oh man, we really need help with our underground city, though. It's terrible down there. And she's like, well, maybe I'll entertain being your governor. And so they kind of reframe that and head down underground into the Lost Boys world. Again, the subplot of Hook and Smee come up. They discover that the Lost Boys are underground, and they lead this attack on the underground, which leads to most everyone gets away, but John ends up staying behind. John is kind of pulled into the orbit of the pirates and invited to be on the crew, to which he accepts. John has a great subplot around his like perception of manliness. He tries to impress his dad in the nursery early on with this like show of manliness, and so he joins the pirates as a continuation of his thoughts around like financial piracy is kind of his way that he tries to engage that. But he's taken away by the pirates in that scene, in that attack. Next up, we have this scene in a sea cave where everyone has left the underground. They're out of their home. Peter is still leading by force of will alone and slowly loses the whole crew of them. They one by one leave him. The Wendy leaves, the Lost Boys leave, Michael leaves, eventually even Tinkerbell leaves. And he's left alone in this cave, and then Hook shows up. And this is kind of like one of the big divergence from the plot scenes, is this scene between Peter Pan and Hook, where they talk a lot about story, and Hook makes this pitch that if they were to join forces, they could control Neverland together. That they kind of exist best as each other. This is a trope, right? They need each other. Hook is the villain and Peter is the hero. What if we join forces and use the power of dreams and of story to rule Neverland, but also by extension the world? And so that is offered to Peter. Eventually, Tinkerbell comes back in and resists Hook. Tries to tell Peter that he can't win anything. The big line in this scene is that you can't win alone. You need your friends in order to win. And Peter is in a moment, he's kind of disoriented, and so Tink attacks Hook. Hook rips her wings off and leaves the scene saying, I'll see you at midnight, Peter, for our fight on the ship. Then the big scene happens where Peter Pan saves Tinkerbell with the audience's applause, a canon scene within Peter Pan. And then, just to kind of keep it as brief as I can so we can get into the individual scenes, big climactic scene happens on the ship, right? Hook offers John, who's pirate inductee now, the chance to kill his sister and his brothers and the Lost Boys and Tiger Lily by dropping him overboard. John eventually says no to that. Peter Pan shows up with Tinkerbell, all the lights go out, and a big old fight happens on the ship, where Peter Pan notably shows up and asks for help from everyone. So Tiger Lily and Wendy jump into it. They have this whole plan around like everyone using light together to blind Captain Hook, because what becomes clear is that Peter can't beat Hook. just from like a physical combat sort of scenario. Hook ends up almost winning the fight, but through Wendy and Tiger Lily and their plan with Tinkerbell, there's this great like girl power moment where like all the light shines on Captain Hook by virtue of their ingenuity and collaboration, and Hook is blinded and eventually forced to walk the plank, and off Hook goes. Notably, at the end of this scene, Peter has kind of learned his lesson that together is the way to do this. That through diversity they have strength, and so he relinquishes control of Neverland to Tiger Lily and the sort of stories that get to be told. There's a transformation of Neverland as Tiger Lily opens up the sort of stories to not just the one that Peter was telling, but rather to all stories, as she kind of opens it up and makes a different sort of Neverland for dreams and for stories.
And I think, very specifically, she talks about the kind of story culture that comes from a more indigenous perspective, the generations of stories that come out of that kind of culture, as opposed to just like the stories of the Western canon, right? Sword fights and Peter Pan as a sort of knight in shining armor against the dastardly pirate foe Captain Hook. That there is many other pools of wonderful stories that hold up our world and that can make our world.
Yes, yep. And that kind of like opening of the story, opening of what Neverland can be, kind of sets Tiger Lily as the new ruler of Neverland, or the new storyteller of Neverland. The Darlings decide to go home, as is canon. They decide to go home and return back to their family. The Lost Boys kind of decide to do so as well, though we don't necessarily find that out clearly until the end of the play. But they eventually head on back. Tiger Lily tells Peter to follow Wendy, and because he clearly wants to, and so Peter flies off. And our denouement scene is they have returned to the nursery. The parents come back after having a night out, and the mother has kind of rethought some of what she had just told Wendy was going to happen, that she's going to advocate for her to not go to finishing school, though slowly, for the purpose of convincing Mr. Darling. Mr. Darling also shows up, having heard a bunch of people talk about Marie Curie, and he's like, so I kind of want you to tell me about that, and I guess I'm sorry for what happened. Sort of still oafish, but sort of the well-intentioned oafishness, perhaps, of Mr. Darling. And then the Lost Boys arrive after the parents have left, and Wendy kind of welcomes them in, tells them one more story, the story to which Peter listens to on the windowsill, not quite going in, but kind of noting his desire to be near, at least to Wendy, and perhaps to the ongoing story that is happening as she tells the story of Peter Pan to the Lost Boys. That's kind of the scope of the play. A lot of individual scenes. Excited to see which ones we talk about today.
Well, yeah, and a lot of, like, as we said in the early part, individual tracks that are very clearly identified in what Lauren Gunderson is doing, where she is sort of putting her authorial stamp and making changes. One of them is to kind of the overall idea of what Neverland is, right? That she's imagined that it is this kind of dream space where Peter is bringing in stories as he's out exploring, and they become part of the world that is fabricated sort of from his experience of things he finds out there. So one of the reasons why we have such a significant scene in the Darling nursery at the beginning of the play, not just because we expect it because it's Peter Pan, is that we see a lot of the things, the physical items from that nursery have become part of Neverland. For example, Michael, the youngest, has this stuffed animal crocodile clock thing that he holds and is part of his nursery experience. John has this sword that he is wielding about. And when they get to Neverland, it doesn't take Wendy and Tiger Lily very long to figure out, like, wait a minute. Crocodile with a clock, sword fighting pirates. This is just like our nursery that you've brought back and fashioned into Neverland somehow. And a lot of the great design concepts for this show sort of use that idea, and the world of Neverland is constructed as these kind of hugely imaginative, larger than life nursery-like sets. That Neverland is this sort of young boy's fantasy of the world based on these kind of material items, and that Peter really is in control of everything on Neverland through whatever mysterious, mystical dream force he's able to kind of create Neverland out of his experiences. Even though while he insists that he's not. And what Lauren Gunderson is really good at is imagining if this, then this. So if it's true that Neverland is constructed and controlled by Peter in his experience of the world and the fantastical elements of the world that he sees, then Hook is part of that. And so what ends up happening with the Peter Hook relationship is that this idea of like an everlasting hero and villain to be in everlasting conflict with each other is really I think a fairly common theme in Western storytelling is brought into this play, right? If you have these big stories of a hero, a singular hero and a singular villain, and the stories are all about their endless combat, then isn't it true that they sort of need each other, right? Like this is the kind of Christopher Nolan like Batman trilogy theme too, right? Like doesn't the hero and the villain don't they kind of go together? Aren't they kind of mirrors of each other? Aren't they kind of attached at the hip? Aren't they kind of, and this is where I think Gunderson is very, very clever in the script, aren't they kind of shadows of each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way that like the shadow theme and the two sides of the same coin sort of ness of Peter and Hook come out is like really particular, and I think critiqued really well, right? Like the way that it sort of falls apart eventually, because that's like Hook's main tack in this play. His main critique as he shows up when he attacks the Lost Boys underground is, this is Pan's story, it's his rules, and we're just like playing in it. And so there is this real like wondering around the efficacy of that story, right? Like as much as we, perhaps certainly by its common usage, we could say that it is a beloved story. But it is one that like has real limitations of like, you don't change society based on one person fighting one person, right? Because you're always like if the hero is always looking for one other person to fight, then they'll just keep finding one other person to fight. And so that cycle perpetuates, and there's no real change to Neverland or to the stories that we're telling, even when the hero wins eventually. So I think that is sort of deconstructed. And the idea
too that like the story is just a kind of way to prop up Peter's ego, right? Like he's imagined this sort of bumbling, evil comedy wizard that is Captain Hook, right? And that's I think that Lauren Gunderson's like questions about Captain Hook as a bad guy are really interesting, right? Like he's a pretty goofy bad guy.
It's
right?
true.
Like he's got the menace and evil of like a Scar of Lion King, but also this like wacky, dumb, like Wile E. Coyote kind of personality. Like you can't really imagine this guy ever succeeding in what he's after, because he's also kind of a nincompoop and always gets himself beat by this like adolescent boy in fights. Like, like he's a grown man. So I do think that Lauren Gunderson's question about like, well, what if, again, it's that if then, if Peter is creating Neverland out of his own imagination, then hasn't he created a villain whose sole purpose is just to be bested by Peter over and over, which sure makes Peter look awfully good.
Pretty good. Yep, and he has a Tinkerbell. He has a fairy who like constantly dotes on him. Yeah. In fact, at one point, I think it's Wendy, but it might be Tiger Lily. Kind of notes that of like, and you always have this fairy on your side who's like like super willing to be on your side and everything. It's a great sideline from Tinkerbell of like, don't listen to them. You're awesome. But yeah, absolutely. You have this sort of like false narrative set up so that he can succeed. And
right, they're not real victories.
Yeah, and they're kind of at the expense. They're not kind of. They are at the expense of the other people in the story with him, right? Like the what the kind of what the Lost Boys actually want is nurture in some way, and so the kind of life or the dream that he casts does not involve nurture. So he has to go and kind of pilot someone else's story and try to bring Wendy in to provide that nurture. That's not what Wendy wants to do, so she changes that narrative. There's all sorts of ways that this story is like not enough for the other characters that are a part of the story.
And one of the other ways, and this really becomes kind of the lens through which this version of the story is understood in like the reviews and such of Peter Pan and Wendy, is how Gunderson has imagined Wendy and Tiger Lily as really the heroes of this story, the people who are the most competent, the people that figure out what's going on the quickest, that solve the problems the quickest. I think it's a lovely little invention that Wendy and Tiger Lily figure out how to use the fairy's light in a magnifying glass to become sort of like laser lights that they blind the pirates with. Science and magic, together in this sort of combat. But the idea of Wendy as a character that, like, listen, I'll just be straight up, like, has her own hopes and dreams
Right.
is like, that's a change to the Peter Pan story.
Yeah. For sure. I think there's a really so there's kind of three dyads in this play, right? You have
three dyads. What a phrase.
Dyads.
You're breaking out the what do people say? The $100 vocabulary word?
Yeah. The weird words. So the three dyads are, you've got Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, right? This dynamic duo who continue to do things. They kind of self-perpetuate their myth, right? Because they just keep running along. Then you have an interesting shadow of that dyad, which is Captain Hook and Smee. They have a very similar relationship. Smee is always there kind of propping up Hook and kind of pushing him forward. They have a similar sort of jealousy relationship, at least in this play, that is sort of
because
like out.
When John becomes a pirate, Smee gets really jealous of John in a similar way to as when Wendy joins the troupe, Tinkerbell gets really jealous of Wendy. Yeah, that's a really good point.
So you have those two kind of reflecting each other, and then you have a new one form. The kind of newness to this event is that Wendy arrives and meets Tiger Lily. Tiger Lily meets Wendy, and they have this like connection. It's described in that first scene of like they're really liking each other. Like they're vibing. They're on the same wavelength. And they have this sort of like connection that leads to a change, that leads to not just a change, but in fact a formation of a triad, because they form up this team with Tinkerbell. And then once that triad forms, it blows wide open. There's this like communal support around this we can only win together. That means that no one is in dyads anymore. But rather the Captain Hook and Smee dyad is broken. The Peter Pan and Tinkerbell dyad becomes like a community of people all working together. And as a result of Tiger Lily and Wendy's finding each other, there is this like new life that springs into being in Neverland.
Let me just quote briefly from, this is about the middle of the play that I think illustrates what you're talking about. Wendy and Tinkerbell, of course, have been kind of going back and forth the whole time. It's suggested that Tinkerbell is jealous because Peter and Wendy clearly like each other. And in fact, their kind of budding almost romance is written, I think, very effectively by Gunderson. Once Wendy finds out that she's been brought here to be a mother, she objects to that heartily. And it says that she's not going to be a mother. She's going to be your governor, who's somebody in charge with some sense and strategy and a bit of hope. And then one of the Peter Pan and Wendy kind of look at each other. One of the Lost Boys says they're looking at each other like their favorite candy. And Tinkerbell just goes crazy. So it starts a back and forth between Wendy and Tinkerbell. They're yelling at each other. They're really at it. And finally, Tiger Lily jumps in. And this is often quoted in reviews because it so clearly illustrates what Gunderson is doing. Tiger Lily jumps into the middle of that fight and says, "All right, that's enough. Don't you understand how utterly useless it is for girls to go against girls? The world's hard enough on us, and then you turn on each other? Come on."
Yeah. Yeah, which then continues like that sort of that moment sort of begins or opens the door to the unraveling of the story that continues, right? You see continual moments where that is evaluated, and they find ways to collaborate, and the whole scheme at the end is the three of them working together. So yeah, I think from that moment on there is this sort of like new imagining of what could be possible for them as they sort of break the rails of the story that was being told and retold.
Well, and Wendy and Tiger Lily are both together the people that kind of resist once the concept of how Neverland works begins to be clear to the characters and to the audience simultaneously, that the whole thing is some sort of imaginative exercise by Peter Pan where he gets to play the hero over and over again. Wendy and Tiger Lily are become the pair that push back against this idea, that are very clear that they're not interested in putting their lives in danger to participate in this kind of heroic like cosplay that Peter Pan is doing. That like real people are in danger. John's been kidnapped by the pirates. They got to get out of here. They're not gonna just go on with this over and over. And they do so for very different reasons. And that's kind of the other part of what Gunderson is rewriting, is the Tiger Lily and the indigenous persons in Neverland part of the story. In this version, that whole people, as you said in the summary, have been erased. Only Tiger Lily is left. And there is a very clear track that Gunderson draws to like the colonial history of the West that goes into places like strange islands in the middle of the waters and erase the culture, the story, the indigenous people in order that they can play hero and conqueror and good guy. And aren't they so great to bring their culture? I mean, in this case, literally, Peter has brought stories from London to an island full of, or used to be full of, indigenous people, and filled the island with his stories, his myths, worlds in which he can play the hero. And really what Gunderson does here is just call that to our attention. She said, Tiger Lily has great monologues throughout the show where she describes in detail what Peter has done to the island, what it means that her family is no longer there, why she refuses to participate in his mythic storytelling. Is kind of, not to put too fine a point on it, manifest destiny kind of rhetoric that really is in the Peter Pan myth in a way that I think a lot of people miss because it's a children's story.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's certainly there in the original one, and I think it's so in the reading of it, it's a small moment because it's just in the character description. But the character description for Peter Pan in the play is both 15 and ageless, rebellious, confident, excitable boy, also American. Um, so the rest of the children in the play are British. Certainly the darlings are. You could do what you wanted with the Lost Boys. But so he's American, and then Tiger Lily is also not British. Um, and so you have kind of throughout the play this, like, this thought around. I think it's absolutely true. This play is critiquing colonialism, and certainly casting Peter Pan as an American accent is bringing in that American colonialism, American imperialism, and critiquing it. Showing the kind of fallout of it as well as it is slowly picked apart.
And again, I just want to point out that Gunderson's apparently has done a fair amount of work with indigenous people on how she's writing and presenting the character of Tiger Lily. Tiger Lily has some moments that could be in bad productions offensive if you were to pull in the design or the imagining, songs, stories, costume items that are sacred, particular, culturally specific to an indigenous people group, and really warns you away from that in how she's written and presented, and cautioned you in the presentation of the Tiger Lily character. And then there's also great jokes that kind of reference that throughout, which again I assume come out of her work with these communities. Like at one point, Tiger Lily says something, because Tiger Lily is friends with Jerome the crocodile throughout. And at one point, she has a great quip that's like, "Yeah, I know it's a little stereotypical. The native girl can talk to animals, but nonetheless,
Here we are.
Jerome the crocodile is here." So I mean, there's it's not too precious about it, and that is, a lot of the reviewers describe this play as woke. It's like a woke Peter Pan, and that certainly has some relevance. I like to push back against that phrasing. I think it sounds pejorative. It sounds dismissive. But there's certainly no getting around the fact that it's the Peter Pan story with some reckoning about what has been harmful in that particular cultural myth. But what I love about it is that I don't think it's preachy in the way that it does that. It is specific, and I said in the beginning that I don't think it's very subtle, but there's a wide gap between not subtle and preachy. It's very open with what it's doing, but it's not reverent about it. It's got jokes about it built in. It's high energy. It really is what you want from Peter Pan, in great sword fights and daring rescues, and the magical moment where the audience resuscitates Tinkerbell through their dreams and hopes, while not being willing to just go along with the parts of the story that have done harm.
Yeah. Yeah, it in so many ways it is an ideal story through which to do this critique, because there is childlike playfulness in it and childlike critique. No, this is not a this is not a child's play necessarily. It's certainly a children's story, but like these are oftentimes adults cast in these roles. Certainly it's open to high schoolers to jump into the play as well. But yeah, I think that like childlike willingness to deal with story and deal with dream, and the possibility that change can happen within the course of a dream, enables the critique to be both declarative and also malleable and flexible, and these characters to be able to change as a result of taking a declarative stance.
One of my favorite little sort of small things that reoccurs throughout the play is in the first Darling nursery scene. Mr. Darling talks about how important it is that they go to this party, because eventually it will get him the job as, I think he says, the chief executive officer. He may say some other phrase, but the key is that it has executive in it. And that word executive becomes kind of a punchline throughout the play of what I think is what I do think is actually maybe the more subtle thing that's going on here, which is the critique of what like young boys are expected to grow up as. And John really as the center of that story, who so desperately wants to be the kind of manly man his father wants him to be. They do a whole thing in the first nursery scene where he poses sort of menacingly to show that he's like becoming a tough guy. And then this phrase executive becomes kind of the draw for all of that idea. We have to have this sort of, I can't remember if it's like executive authority or executive personality. There's some noun that is attached to the word executive that they use throughout the play. But there's this sense of like, you have to be this manly leader, this tough leader. And that's what Hook uses to draw him in, is like, wouldn't you like to have some executive authority? If you come over and join our pirates, you can be, part of this executive situation. And it's just a really nice, that's obviously a contemporary use of language and idea. I don't even know if they had chief executive officers in the time period that Peter Pan was written in. Maybe so, maybe not. But this idea of an executive as a type of personality, typically stereotypically a type of male personality, is critiqued in a maybe a more subtle way across the course of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to have Michael be the sort of one that in the kind of ending last moments of the decision of John is the like next generation beyond the like beyond the attempt of John to be this masculine presence. Michael is the one that pipes up and kind of breaks the spell and is like, you don't know what you're doing. My sister is the best person in the world and she's gonna beat you up. It's just like a great re-envisioning of those brothers and the way that they've interacted with the world. There's so many like little facets of this play. There's so many ways that this play can be talked about. So many great characters, right? Like these are some of like the big characters in the narratives of theater, certainly,
and not
in
just
storytelling.
mouthpieces for like a political or social commentary. It does have that in it, but the characters are big and lively, full of personality, full of breath and life.
Yep.
Even beyond that.
Yep, there's great chorus work in this play with the Lost Boys and the pirate crew. They're both kind of like antiphonally yelling at each other occasionally, which is great. So many great facets of this play. Alas, we are towards the end of our time on this particular podcast to talk about it, but that doesn't mean we have to stop talking about it with all of you. If you have seen Peter Pan and Wendy, read it, been in it, would just like to chat with someone about it, we'd love to be those folks for you and to broaden it out to the community as well. You can find us on the socials that we are on at the username at NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites. We'd love to keep talking about this play with you.
If you enjoyed this conversation and the other conversations of our season, if you're excited for Theme Month, which begins next week, one more shout out, please just recommend us to your family, your friends, folks you know that like theater, conversations about plays, writing, analysis, character work with themes, all that stuff. Send them our way. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you get your podcasts. You can also like our Facebook page, and a link to the new episode appears every Monday when we publish, including next Monday when we're back with the start of Themed Month. Until then, I'm Jacob. I'm here with Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.